You are about to watch a conversation that I had with one of the most famous men in Israel. Folks, what you hear in the next 40 minutes is going to blow your mind. Get ready. This is going to be informative, encouraging, uplifting, and absolutely shocking in some cases. By the time you get to the end of this video, you'll be happy you watched it. Oh my goodness, everybody. Look, I have to tell you this. We are in for an incredible treat. I have to tell you guys a story before we talk about our guest a little bit. Our guest is really an amazing man. Gadi Taub is somebody that I didn't even really know about until an introduction was made to him. And I have to tell you this little story. David Tal, you guys know he does a lot of shows with me lately since Israel has gone to war. He he heard that I was going to have a conference call with Gadi, and I watched him turn into, like, he melted. I couldn't believe it. I've never seen him starstruck before when he walked in the studio and sat and talked to him. And I didn't realize just how loved by so many in Israel you are. Gadi has an amazing reach in Israel. He is by far one of the most loved and famous personalities there. And there's a lot of interesting things you're going to learn about him. Dr. Taub is amazingly brilliant. I very much admire his handle, not just on American history, but I admire his handle on the history of his people, the Jews, and how he puts all of that together. It's absolutely amazing. You guys are in for a treat. I'm just telling you this right now. This is going to be one of, I hope, many interviews. If you have not gone to his channel and watched his Israel Update channel, you need to. I think it's just wonderful. I have binge watched them all. Thank God it's only a few right now, because I would have just watched every single one of them because they're very, very good. Many of you guys ask me where a good source for news is. You're going to find some good insight and good news at his channel. Gadi, I would just love it if you could take a few minutes to let people know a little bit about yourself and your background and who you are, and then we're just going to get right into it.
Yeah, so first of all, it's amazing to be with you, James, and thanks for having me. It's a great privilege to know you and the great work you do for Israel. So I find myself between the United States and Israel, because I had this love for America when I was really small. My first literary love is Damon Runyon with the stories about New York. And I was, I think, 12 or 13 at the time. As I grew up, I noticed how many similarities there are between this small society and your huge society. Both society future-oriented, focused on freedom, and both comprised of many, many immigrants, of which one was my father. So I teach, my PhD is in American history, but I mostly teach the history of the Zionist idea at the university where I work, at Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I have to say, I find myself at I'm not going to say enemy territory, but at least not a comfortable home, since universities are so far on the progressive left, and many of them are now waking up because so many Jews have been on the progressive left, and Israeli professors have tried to imitate that. And as you know, the university works, your advancement depends on your peers, usually in America, so you have to find favor and write all this anti-Zionist tirades in order to promote your own career, and I refuse to play that game because I'm a Zionist. And I teach the idea, but I tell my students that I'm a natural Zionist. And this is because my father came from Czechoslovakia. He was not a Holocaust survivor. He was a refugee. And his mother had died when he was 12. And soon after that, the Nazis invaded Czechoslovakia. and he remembered the Wehrmacht, the Nazi soldiers coming in. It was before the SS, before the Holocaust. They came into their apartment to ask for water. They were cooking pasta outside,
Hmm.
and my father was 12 years old, but extremely erudite, and read newspapers in 4 languages. He was like a news
Wow.
freak. He said to his father, who was broken because of the death of his wife, he said, "This is not going to end well, and Jews have no place here." And he convinced his father. Imagine that. I don't know what vision that child had. And they went down the Danube River,
Hmm.
in a steamboat, like in a Mark Twain story.
Oh yeah.
And then they reached the Black Sea, and they boarded a refugee ship. And for 4 months, no country in the world let them ashore. So, I tell my students I'm natural Zionist because for me this is a 12-year-old Jewish boy with no land to step on anywhere.
Wow.
Not
Wow.
Roosevelt's America, not Churchill's England, nowhere in Europe, nowhere in Africa, nowhere, until they ended up here, and the Brits arrested them. And then my father, he was a self-made man, so his father volunteered to the British Army. He was a cook in Malta. It was very dangerous to be a cook in Malta because
Oh
everybody
yeah.
bombed it. It was the nearest airport to North Africa, where Rommel and the Wehrmacht were fighting. My father stayed in a boarding school, and he learned to be a blacksmith. But then in the War of Independence, he lost 4 fingers on his left hand, and he was wounded in one of the first battles in January of 1948, and so he lost his profession too, and he became an economist. And but I would have said with his own 10 fingers, but there were only six. So with 6 fingers, he became one of the most important economists in Israel by his own merits, and became the Secretary General of the Bank of Israel, and then the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission. And then the administration changed and Likud rose to power. It's odd because I now vote Likud. My father was a labor Zionist, but and he could have become rich because after you are the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, you can have any dream job in any bank.
Oh yeah.
But he said, I didn't come here to get rich. I came here to rebuild a nation. And he took a small job in the public sector as the head of a public publishing house. Now that's a very Israeli concept because, you know, there are there are 330 million potential readers in English in America alone. In the whole wide world, there are probably 6 million adult readers of Hebrew, and so if you want to translate the treasures of world culture and Jewish culture, or have like the edition of Theodor Herzl's diaries, like the scientific edition, you need public finances because you will never sell enough copies to finance that. So that's what my father did. He did it until age 82. So and I'm telling you this story just to say that I know all the explanations. I know all the reasoning why Zionism is deeply moral, and I have no qualms about it. But before any argument, whatever, I have a sentiment and an existential feeling that I will not let it. I will do my utmost so that never again will a Jewish boy be in a ship unable to disembark anywhere in the world.
Amen. And I have good news for you. The words of the Father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob said that once he replants you in your land, you'll never be unplanted again. And Amos tells us that, and I believe that. And it's amazing because when you look at the story
Amen.
of 67 and 73 and just the story of what happened on the Golan Heights as the Syrian tanks were coming in, it's amazing on the Yom Kippur War. It is undeniable that the hand of God is upon Israel, and it's something that we can find rest in. I am very disgruntled. I think that's a good term to use, by the characterization of Zionism being a bad word. I can tell you, I think your articulation of your personal story may be one of the best descriptions of why you stand as a Zionist. I think there's something spectacular about your background that I don't think that you shared that I would love for you to share, because this is something I didn't know until recently. But there was a point in time where you were a lot more, your views concerning a lot of these issues were slightly different, or maybe even in many cases a lot more different than they are now. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think this is
Sure.
very important for people to hear.
Sure. So I believed in peace. I my my original my moral basis for Zionism is also that of Theodor Herzl, which is a vision akin to Woodrow Wilson, believing in the right of all peoples to self-determination. This is why we too, the Jews, have a right to our own state, as it says in our Declaration of Independence. The most, as Americans know, the second paragraph of their Declaration of Independence, the most important sentence in ours, I'll say it in Hebrew and then in English. זו זכותו הטבעית של העם היהודי להיות ככל עם ועם עומד ברשות עצמו במדינתו הריבונית. Ben Gurion's biblical Hebrew. It is the right of the Jewish people to be like all peoples, masters of their own fate in their own sovereign state.
Hmm.
So this is the universal right of self-determination. And so I believed that in order to have peace in this region, our neighbors, the Palestinian Arabs, should enjoy the same rights. And then we will have two nation states living by each other. And for that, I was willing to go to great lengths and share the land. And and then what changed my mind, James, was facts.
Yeah,
We just learned that our neighbors, th- their the, their national ethos revolves around a murderous religious
that's
view,
right.
and much to my regret, we in academia do not take religion seriously, and that's the most guilty are the progressives. And by that, I don't mean that I want everybody in academia to be religious. I mean that when you look at the mullahs in Tehran and they say it's a religious commandment to destroy Zionism,
Yeah,
they mean it.
yeah,
It's not propaganda, it's not just fancy phrasing. They mean it. And I once did not believe that these people mean it. So when President Obama, who destabilized our region, and we see the repercussions now, said back then that the Palestinians, like us, want their children to come back from school, have a warm dinner, want their livelihood and their leisure and their peace. We believed them because we could only imagine other people in the image of ourselves, and we had no real respect for differences. All this academia who keeps talking about the other and the other never really has any respect for real differences. These people who have murdered Israelis, I don't want to describe on your show and disturb the sleep of your listeners of the horrors, but you know them, you know your audience, and you know where to point them if they're interested. But we looked at these horrors committed in what they believe is a religious framework of reference with relish. Then you have to understand that they are serious, and that made me gradually move from peace to separation without peace. I supported the disengagement from Gaza. I did not imagine that this could happen. And then to realizing that we are dealing with a people who bring their children from the nursery. In the nursery, they play games in which killing Jews is
that's right.
the goal of the game. Then we can only subdue them. We cannot live next to this monstrous ideology. So I changed my views based on facts, and as you know, the the the, the political milieu that I left did not forgive me. So so I carry the badge. I carry the badge of their hate proudly. But I'll say this: that even when I was on the left, I thought progressivism was deeply flawed. So I picked up fights with in my first book, which is now 26 years old. It more than a quarter of a century was when I was a young liberal, and I
Hmm.
said progressivism and postmodernism are going to destroy liberalism because I
Hmm.
share with liberals the belief in liberty, but that's not a belief in liberty. And now when I wrote that book, people said, why are you bothering with these nutcases at the margins of some academic department? Who cares about their gender fluidity ideology, their post Zionism, their post colonial Edward Said references? And I thought it's a danger. And I wish, James, I had been proven wrong. But now it's the dogma. Now in academia, I do not compete in the race for advancement in the according to their. I write my own books. I don't care if they give me promotions at the university. I'm satisfied as long as I can freely speak to students and
Yeah.
educate them and cultivate their minds, and I can write my books, and they can keep writing, academic journal pieces. I'm grateful that the audience for my books are much larger, and they were bestsellers in Hebrew. So there is an audience who was thirsty back then and is thirsty now to a critique of the craziness that our elites are force feeding our children and our media and an innocent public.
Man, that is powerful. And I can tell you that I very much agree with you. You know, my mom and my dad were both born and raised in Egypt. And so I know a thing or two about Gaza, and I know a thing or two about Islam. And it's interesting to me because if you are an Islamic fundamentalist, meaning you believe in the fundamentals of the Quran, then you don't believe in the elimination of Israel. You believe in the elimination of Jews. This is a distinction that a lot of people don't necessarily recognize because there is a what appears to be an initial, let's just call it soft anti-Semitism call to eliminate the Jewish state. But the real deal here is killing Jews. It's sad, but that's the problem that we're seeing right now. And we all know that Israel is the ancestral homeland of the Jews. But there is something I want to read to you. This is actually in the Quran. The Quran actually says this. I want to read this. And there's many more that are worse than this. But there's a basis for why I'm reading this because we're going to get into a subject that I think is very important. It's one that you're in the middle of every single day. It says this. It says, "Wa makru wa makara Allahu wa Allahu khayra al-makrina." Now, what that means is very interesting. It means for anybody that doesn't understand Arabic, and my audience knows what this means because I quote this oftentimes. It refers to they were deceiving, meaning they're referring to the Jews being deceivers, which is a whole other story. And it says, and Allah deceived because Allah is the chief of deceivers. So in Islam, one of the primary and most admirable characteristics that exist, particularly in wartime, which every day is wartime for them because of jihad and many of the other issues that follow that, deception is a big deal. It's a huge deal. So this is why Israel is being forced to go into Al-Shifa hospital. This is the reason why we are the IDF is discovering babies in the basements of these hospitals. This is why we're finding these underground tunnels below the hospitals. We have a big problem, Gadi. I think the problem is bigger than the military problem, and I'm going to explain this in just a second. Look, the Israeli Defense Force will not stop until they do what they set out to do. Let's all face it. They are one of the strongest militaries in the world, and they're not changing, okay? The Israeli Air Force has some of the best pilots in the world. We don't even have to go there. But the one thing I do want to say is a war that I think Israel is beginning to lose, and I don't want Israel to lose this war, is the information war. It's the media war. We have a big problem here. There's a lot of lying going on What do we do about that, Gadi? I mean, this is something you're dealing with every single day. Uh, can we talk about that problem? Because one of the lies I'm hearing right now, and it worries me for the state of Israel, and perhaps maybe it's a good thing that this, it's never a good thing that this happened, but it's a good thing that eyes are beginning to open because, like the interview you had on Sunday, if you guys haven't heard that interview, I shared a very small preview of the interview. It was correctly stated that you have even a bigger problem in Judea and Samaria than you ever would Gaza. So can we talk about this? Because there's a lot of lying going on right now. And how do we deal with that? We have brainwashed kids that are standing up applauding Hamas. It doesn't make sense. What do we do about this? You're a professor. You're where it's all starting.
So, there are various levels in which to attack this. And originally, as a university professor, I thought that the way to attack this was to show the contradictions. That if you think you are tolerant for tolerating jihadists, then what you're tolerating is people who would burn gays alive. And that's not tolerance. So when you see a powerful meme on the internet is when you have these idiot kids holding a sign saying queers for Palestine, and underneath it you have chickens for KFC. Like, you try to go with this sign to Gaza and you will not walk 5 meters alive.
No
So
way.
that's one way to do it, is witty people going on social media and doing it. But I think that what we are facing now is, and then I'll speak on what's between the two. What we need to do now is expose the big lie. And the big lie now, which the Biden administration is doing its best to hide, is that appeasing Iran has lit the Middle East on fire. So note what the Biden administration is trying to do here. And I published a piece in Tablet called Biden's Three No's, and people are
It's a
very angry.
great article, by the way.
Thank you.
Not to interrupt you, I want to say this. If you have not read that article, you need to read the article. It's very yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead. It's a great article.
It's People were very angry at me because Israelis were in great distress, and then comes the president of the biggest superpower in the world and said, I got your back, don't worry. And I looked at that and I said, well, that's well and good, but that's not the whole picture. They sent I think it was a Gerald Ford that was sent to the Eastern Mediterranean, the
That's right.
aircraft carrier,
Yep.
to deter Hezbollah. But I said, this is not just to deter Hezbollah,
No.
it's also to deter Israel, because
Yeah.
the price was that Israel should not preempt Hezbollah. Now there is a convergence of interest because we needed time and space to concentrate our forces on Gaza. But what the American interest was not the same, because this administration is a continuation of the two Obama administrations,
That's right.
in which appeasement of Iran was the centerpiece of their stupid Middle East policy, their reckless Middle East policy, based, as you can guess, on academic progressivism, because Obama was a student of Edward Said from Colombia, where you see anti-Semitism now. And their idea was that if we just appease these guys, they'll be like us, they'll be good. The problem is that we have pushed them too far. Let's just be kind and everything will be fine. So they opened the floodgates of finances, and Iran just spread its tentacles over the Middle East. So when Biden arrived here with such urgency, note that there is something else going on. And the other thing that's going on is to keep the conflict localized. Because if the war spreads from Gaza to the northern border and Hezbollah, that means, since this is a direct Shiite proxy of Iran, that means that everyone will see that the Middle East policy of the Biden administration had collapsed. And this is, James, if that message could be conveyed in America, that we understand that the reason that Hamas became so bold and so well equipped is because you have basically vacated the meaning of the sanctions and opened the streams of money for the anti-Semitic ayatollahs.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
that's the lie that we need to expose. And I think Biden is vulnerable. He's vulnerable in an election year when you see that all his progressivism and all his the squad in Congress and all that, you can connect the dots. Anti-Semitism, Iran, Hezbollah horrors, these are all parts of the same appeasement toward fundamental radicals.
No, you're 100% right. Very, very correct on that. And it's interesting to me because most people don't understand the geopolitics of the Middle East. They don't understand our culture. They don't understand our background. They don't understand our mind. They don't understand the approach that we have. And the JCPOA, I said it from the very beginning, was the gift that kept on giving. And I'm saying that in the most sarcastic way because even the sunset clause in that poorly written agreement, which it's not even worth the paper that it's on, has expired. And yet there has been an hyper extenuated movement to appease those individuals that are in Iran right now. We had Raisi, and there's a reason why they call him the butcher of Tehran. We had Raisi stand up in front of the United Nations while kissing his Quran, utilizing the leftist attitude and mindset of the United States of America as a justification for Sharia law. And most people didn't even understand the beginning of the implications of what he was communicating. The idea that his manipulation of certain American words was so well crafted should be an indicator of the darkness that exists within his heart and within the mind of anybody in his regime that work with him. He actually called, this is amazing, he called Israel and even America cultural apartheidists. He referred to it as cultural apartheid. And one of his descriptions of cultural apartheid was not being able to wear the hijab for little girls that are in school. I mean, imagine, and some people are praising that. Like they're looking at that and they're just saying, hey, this is this is just a man who wants a better life, and people don't understand it. I'm going to say this because I think it's important. I think that one of the worst signs of this that nobody made a big deal of, I made a big deal of it. I got beat up for it quite a bit. A lot of people were not happy with me when I did this, but one of the first indicators of this with the current regime, I say regime in office, as Biden's regime, was when he declared the Yemeni Houthis to no longer be, in essence, terrorists and enemy combatants. And the greatest problem that we have with that, geopolitically speaking, was Saudi Arabia was then forced to no longer be able to use American-sold arms to defend their security interests against the Houthis to the Yemenis in the south. And what that did was literally forced Saudi Arabia into the arms of Russia to buy many arms from them. And then when they went and bought those S-300, S-400 batteries, the MiGs, all that stuff, Russia turned around brilliantly, by the way, and said, we'll handle the problem of the Houthis for you. We have a relationship with Tehran. We'll make sure that we take care of that. But what they don't realize is that within the hearts of many, many, many people in Saudi Arabia, there grew a huge reluctance to want to continue to move forward in the condition that it's in. So I believe, this is a personal belief of mine, and some people might disagree with me, I actually believe that many of the Arab states, specifically the Sunnis, are begging for the Hamas problem to be finished. Matter of fact, I think the normalization agreement won't continue until Hamas is destroyed between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Mohammed bin Shalom won't say it outright, but I think that's what he's gunning for right now because of how big of a problem Iran is.
Absolutely. They can't say this out loud, but you're figuring all the political vectors precisely because they have the same problems. The last thing they want is a Muslim Brotherhood underground undermining their own regimes. And so note what was going on before and what Iran did here. There was under Trump and Secretary Mike Pompeo, the U.S. policy changed and gave a protective umbrella to a forming alliance between the Sunnis and Israel in order to protect themselves from Iran. And I spoke to Mike Pompeo on my podcast, and he said the key to that policy was bypassing the Palestinian veto. For half a century, we've been saying we can't advance. I remember John Kerry with his miserable droop saying
Oh,
no, 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 no.
oh,
He meant there would be no peace with any Arab country before the Israeli Palestinian conflict is resolved. And that was the key that Mike Pompeo rightly pointed at, along with Netanyahu, saying, we'll do this over the heads of the Palestinians because there are larger interests. So the Palestinian issue as a traditional banner of Arab unity, because freeing the land of Israel from Jewish um, uh, proprietorship is a central thing in their theology and so forth. But we have managed to, since Iran posed a much greater danger, we had an opportunity to create new coalitions. And this is what we did. Now, if you look at what happened now, Hamas is an Iran proxy, right? So basically, Iran is throwing its proxies like bowling balls at the Sunni Jewish coalition. And the ball is always the Palestinians.
that's
It's
right.
always that. They manage to reinsert the Palestinian issue into the middle of it. And look how the world is easily manipulated.
Yeah,
The suffering of the Palestinians, which is all the fault of Hamas, because even according to international law, if your enemy hides combatants inside a civil population, they are committing a war crime, not you. And you cannot commit atrocities and then run and hide behind civilians and say, "Oh, then everything stops. There's no war because the Israelis will not kill civilians." And so Israel is maneuvering in a very difficult territory. But look at the hypocrisy. Look at what Assad did in Syria after
oh yeah,
Obama's miserable uh, uh, red lines that he then backtracked on and let Russia in, and we saw the slaughter and the butchery. And look at what the United States did along with a Western coalition in Mosul and Raqqa.
oh,
I think maybe, correct me, some 30,000 civilians were killed
easily.
in because ISIS was hiding in a civil population, and the coalition rightly said, if you hide in a civil coalition, that blood is on your hands. But then when it comes to the Jews, there's another standard. And
Yeah,
so all these progressive human rights organizations, you dig a little. There was a brilliant documentary series here in Israel done by an NGO called Enough Adkan, and they planted a mole inside ISM, International Solidarity Movement. That's a human rights organization.
yeah, they're all
and
human
and
rights
this
organizations.
and this Scandinavian woman, she volunteered to them, and she penetrated it with a hidden camera. And
Hmm.
in the end, James, what do you find? The
Yeah.
finance comes from the Muslim Brotherhood and
Mm.
Hamas. These human rights organization of these people who murder and rape and torch people alive. These are the great patrons of human rights. So when you see a human rights organization, usually it's a disguise for some anti-Semitic arrangement.
Yeah, undoubtedly, and the even the phrase Palestinian is designed to be something that is deeply anti-Semitic in many ways, because a lot of people don't realize the origination of the term Palestinian. If you understand that, this goes back to one of the early Roman emperors who actually chose to refer to Jews as Philistina, which is the term that's very similar to what we use in Arabic for the Philistines when you read it
Yeah, the biblical
in the
Philistines.
Bible. So what he did was he chose to refer to Jews by their ancient enemies in an attempt for mockery. So the first Palestinians in the land of Israel were Jews, and a lot of people this is something they don't understand because of the lies that are communicated. But I want to play a video for you. And I want to get your reaction. I've been dying to hear your reaction to this. I want to say this. My people have seen this video a lot of times, many, many times. I specifically, in all fairness, and I want to disclose this, okay? I think it's important. I despise this man. There is nothing about this man that I like. I think he is a liar. I think he's dishonest. I think he's evil. He's deeply anti-Semitic. He's shrewd in many ways, and quite frankly, he's disgusting. But I want you to react to this because this again speaks to many of the lies. This would be fun to watch Michael react to, by the way. this because this really speaks of a lot of what's happening geopolitically in the region. And I want to say this about Gaza. When I was a kid, I was raised by my mother telling me stories about Gaza when she was a missionary in Gaza as an Egyptian. Okay. So people don't understand Gaza was originally under the possession of Egypt and Egypt didn't want it. And then when we decided to try to, you remember, I mean, I don't know, you remember the old speeches of Ariel Sharon, not one missile, will be, if one missile gets fired, then we'll deal with it, when they gave the Gaza over to the Palestinians in 2005. What's funny to me about that, what's funny is not a single Jew stayed there. If you want to talk about people losing their land, it's right there. And don't even get me started on the greatest story of decolonization that ever existed. All I have to do is just give you one line of thinking. Turkey literally giving the land of Israel to the League of Nations. We're just talking about legally, right? And then the League of Nations basically telling Britain to create an environment for the people of Israel to have their own homeland and all of the legalities that are tied to this. It's just absolutely unbelievable. Okay, let me play this video for you. I'm warning you, this is inflammatory. So here it is. Take a listen. This is the Secretary General of the United Nations addressing the United Nations, and I'm only going to indulge him for 2 minutes. Take a listen to this.
Excellencies, the situation in the Middle East is growing more dire by the hour. The war in Gaza is raging and risks spiraling throughout the region. Divisions are splintering societies, tensions threaten to boil over. At a crucial moment like this, it is vital to be clear on principles, starting with the fundamental principle of respecting and protecting civilians. I have condemned unequivocally the horrifying and unprecedented 7 October acts of terror by Hamas in Israel. Nothing can justify the deliberate killing, injuring, and kidnapping of civilians or the launching of rockets against civilian targets.
That was his obligatory speech. Now listen to what he says now.
Yeah. All hostages must be treated humanely and released immediately and without conditions. And I respectfully note the presence among us of members of their families. Excellencies, it is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation.
Okay, I can't take it anymore. It did not happen in a vacuum. 56 years of suffocating occupation. I know we're limited on time. Can you respond to that, please? I've spent lots of videos responding to this liar, but
that's atrocious, So, well, the Holocaust didn't happen in a vacuum, too. The poor Germans were subject to the Versailles treatment. So, what could they do except kill Jews? This is completely ridiculous. But also, the whole. It's very easy to manipulate the horror of children dying under bombs, and nobody can be indifferent to that. But then don't lose your moral clarity. When, as Benjamin Netanyahu put it, we protect our women and children with rockets. They protect their rockets with women and children. True. So if you think that we will live under a reign of terror where you could torture children in front of their parents, dismember them in front of their parents alive, and then we will do nothing because you hide your rocket inside a building where families live, then you are wrong. I didn't hear anybody say that, oh, all those poor Germans in Dresden, oh, all those innocent civilians who voted for the Nazis and supported them and helped their war machine. This happens only to Jews. Nobody says in Mosul that we should not attack ISIS, or the civilized world should not attack ISIS because they hide in a civilian population. Right. And the demand is that Israel will surrender to the most horrendous, inhuman, monstrous regime right at our doorstep, aiming to kill women and children, while we do the utmost to avoid it. And wherever we bomb, we first drop leaflets and say, clear the area because we are going to bomb there. And if you want to stay and protect your Hamas fighter, that's your problem. And if you leave your children there, their blood is on your hands. And instead, we get these moral lectures from people like the Secretary General of the United Nations. And it all goes back, James, to the same thing: anti Semitism. There is a different standard applied to Jews, and the conscience of anti Semitism is very easily tickled with the idea that Jews are killing children again. So blood libels from the Middle Ages, where it was said that we prepare our matzot, our Passover bread, with the blood of Christian children, has just metamorphosed into now we are bloodthirsty for Palestinian children. And this is absolutely
It's a
disgusting.
lie. The Jews are a treasure to the world. If it was not for the Jews, my mom raised me knowing this, I would not have the Bible that I read every day. If it were not for the Jews, there was so much that we would not have. And we owe a debt of gratitude to you and your people and to the God who created you and gave you to us. I want to do this closing because I know we're out of time. First of all, how can we get involved in this? This is a war for the world. This isn't just a war for Israel. How can we get involved? How can we serve? How can we be a part of things? The other thing is, how can people learn more about you? How can they, go to your website, your Rumble, different places like that? I know you have a locals page, hopefully soon, that's going to be set up. It's a great way for people to support you. Can you tell us a little bit about all of that?
So first of all, there's the Israel Update channel on Rumble that Mike Duran and we constantly follow the war with facts and analysis.
Great, by the way.
And that can help keep people informed. I think, as I said, that Americans can the best service Americans can do now is protest against their own government and its ridiculous Iran policy, and expose it and protest it around the clock. Then I think, we are all fighting the war of ideas, and that's not just in the media. So whatever support for the struggle against the progressive shield that radical fundamentalist violent Islam is getting under the term Islamophobia. One of my favorite American writers, Andy McCarthy, said that Islamophobia is not a phobia. It's a term invented by the Muslim Brotherhood in order to discourage any criticism of Sharia supremacy. That's what it is. So don't be afraid to criticize people who give aid and comfort to Hamas. And then I think in the long run, I think that we the people who are fighting for the Judeo-Christian values should create our own think tanks, our own academic institutions, because those that exist now are rotten to the core, and the way they conduct their own appointments is they just duplicate their own rotten DNA. And we need places where you can breathe clear intellectual air, and that is true of Israel, and that is true of America as well. I am a major contributor, I guess, one of the editors of a site called Midah in Israel, and we do crowdfunding, and we were very successful in it, and we provide independent thought, and it starts from criticism of policy and ends up to the discussion of ideas. So I think that wherever you are, if you can contribute to the war of ideas in Israel, in the United States, by finding a think tank that you support, finding a university that's untouched by this autoimmune disease called progressivism, then that's a worthy cause.
Yeah, that's great.
And finally, James, I just want to thank you because of people like you who are willing to face this storm of moral idiocy with a clear moral voice for the good. I don't know what we would do without.
Yeah, and I got to tell you this, Gadi, I'm just selfish. I'm selfish because I'm doing it for the same reason my grandmother and grandfather wanted to do it. I want my family to be blessed. I want the church that I pastor to be blessed. I want my country to be blessed. And that if I want them to be blessed, then I am going to bless God's people. And I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. And God gave Israel a great responsibility, and every single time Israel is held to that responsibility, the world has been benefited by it. And I think anybody who's
I'm not a pastor nor a rabbi, but God bless you, James.
thank you, and may God bless you. What a great time! Thank you for being with us. It means a lot to me. This is not the last. We have to have you back because you're a wealth of knowledge. It's a blessing to it. So, all right, guys. Well, there it is.
Thank you so much.
We're grateful to have Gadi here. Please support him. Go to his Israel update. We'll put all of his information in the comments of the show here. And you guys have been asking ways that you can support Israel. This is a fundamental way to support Israel, by supporting Gadi, because he's getting the word out, and it's really important. So we love you guys. God bless you. We'll see you soon on the next one. We got lots of great things planned for you in the future.